Jordan was an ordinary boy with a big smile and curious eyes. At just 12 years old, he was full of excitement because this was his first time flying on an airplane alone. His father, Mr. Andrews, had planned everything carefully to make sure Jordan would have a comfortable trip to visit his grandmother. To surprise him, Mr. Andrews had booked Jordan a first-class ticket. He wanted his son to experience something special, a little treat for how well he had been doing in school. Jordan wore his favorite white t-shirt and jeans. He didn't think much about his clothes because he was just happy about the adventure. He held a small backpack filled with snacks, a book, and his tablet. As they arrived at the airport, his father bent down and looked Jordan in the eyes. "Remember, son," he said, "you belong wherever you go. Be confident and enjoy the flight." Jordan nodded, his father's words making him feel braver. After a warm hug, his father handed him the first-class ticket and walked him to the check-in counter. The airline staff smiled as they checked his ticket and guided him toward security. Mr. Andrews waved goodbye, reminding Jordan to call him once he landed. As Jordan approached the gate, he couldn't help but notice the sleek airplanes outside the large windows. Everything seemed new and exciting. When the gate agent scanned his ticket, she smiled warmly. "You're in first class, young man," she said, motioning toward the plane's entrance. Jordan walked into the airplane, looking around in awe. The first-class cabin was luxurious. The seats were wide, with soft leather and plenty of legroom. A small pillow and blanket were neatly placed on each seat. Jordan smiled as he found his assigned seat and put his backpack on the floor. He sat down and marveled at how comfortable the chair felt. It was like sitting on a cloud. But his excitement didn't last long. A few minutes later, a stern-looking flight attendant walked toward him. She paused in front of his seat, her eyebrows raised. "Excuse me," she said, looking at Jordan's ticket. "Are you sure you're supposed to be sitting here?" Jordan nodded confidently and handed her his ticket. "Yes, Mom. This is my seat," he replied politely. The flight attendant glanced at the ticket and frowned. "This must be a mistake," she said. "First class is usually for adults. Let me check with the gate agent." Jordan's cheeks flushed with embarrassment as passengers nearby turned to look. He felt their curious eyes on him, and some even whispered to each other. "But my dad bought this ticket for me," Jordan tried to explain. The flight attendant, however, seemed uninterested in his words. After a brief conversation with another crew member, the flight attendant returned and shook her head. "I'm sorry, young man," she said, her tone firm. "It looks like you'll need to move to the economy section. This seat is reserved for premium travelers." Jordan's heart sank. He didn't understand why they didn't believe him. Feeling helpless, he gathered his backpack and followed the flight attendant to the back of the plane. As he walked down the aisle, he could hear people whispering and see their questioning looks. He kept his head down, trying to hold back tears. The economy seat he was given was smaller and less comfortable. Jordan sat quietly, gripping his backpack tightly. He felt humiliated and confused. All he had wanted was to enjoy the flight, but now he felt out of place and unwelcome. He thought about calling his dad, but decided to wait until the plane landed. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Jordan took a deep breath and tried to distract himself with his tablet. Little did he know, his father would soon learn about what had happened, and everything was about to change. Jordan sat quietly in the cramped economy seat, staring out of the small airplane window. His excitement from earlier had completely disappeared. Instead, he felt a lump in his throat and a weight in his chest. He couldn't understand why the flight attendant didn't believe him, even after he showed her the ticket. The other passengers around him were busy settling in, chatting, or scrolling through their phones. Jordan, however, kept replaying the humiliating scene in his mind. He couldn't forget the way everyone in first class had stared at him as if he didn't belong there. He clenched his backpack tightly, feeling both embarrassed and frustrated. After a few minutes, he decided he couldn't just sit there. He had to call his dad. Pulling out his phone, he quickly dialed Mr. Andrews' number. The phone rang only twice before his father answered. "Jordan, how's the flight so far?" Mr. Andrews' warm and cheerful voice came through the line. Jordan hesitated, trying to hold back his emotions. "Dad," he said softly, "something happened." Mr. Andrews immediately picked up on the worry in his son's voice. "What's wrong, son? Tell me." Jordan explained everything. The flight attendant, how she made him leave first class, and how everyone had stared at him. His voice wavered as he spoke, but he managed to get through the story. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Andrews' tone changed, firm and calm, but with a seriousness that Jordan recognized. "Jordan, listen to me," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong. You have every right to be in that seat. I'm so sorry this happened to you." "It's okay, Dad," Jordan replied, though his voice didn't sound convincing. "I'm fine." Mr. Andrews didn't believe that for a second. "No, it's not okay," he said firmly. "I'm going to handle this right now. I want you to sit tight and try to stay calm. I promise things will be made right." After ending the call, Jordan felt a little better knowing his father was on his side. He trusted his dad to fix the situation, though he still felt uneasy. He looked around at the passengers in the economy section, wondering if anyone noticed what had happened to him. Most people seemed unaware, going about their business. Meanwhile, Mr. Andrews sprang into action. As a major stakeholder in the airline, he had the contact information for the company's top executives. He made a series of quick phone calls, explaining the situation and demanding immediate action. His calm yet commanding tone made it clear he wouldn't accept excuses. Back on the plane, Jordan noticed a subtle change in the flight attendants' behavior. One of them walked past him and glanced at his seat before quickly looking away. Another flight attendant whispered something to a colleague while nervously glancing in Jordan's direction. He could tell something was happening, but he didn't know what. About 30 minutes into the flight, the same stern flight attendant from earlier approached Jordan. This time, her demeanor was different, her expression nervous and apologetic. "Young man," she said, her voice softer now, "there's been a misunderstanding. Please follow me back to your seat in first class." Jordan blinked, unsure if he heard her correctly. "Back to first class?" he asked, confused. "Yes," the flight attendant replied, nodding quickly. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." As Jordan gathered his backpack and followed her back to the front of the plane, he couldn't help but notice the curious looks from other passengers. When he arrived at his original seat, it looked even more inviting than before. The flight attendant helped him settle in, offering extra snacks and asking if he needed anything. Jordan wasn't sure what had changed, but he felt a little relief as he sank back into the comfortable first-class chair. He couldn't wait to call his dad after the flight to find out what had happened. What Jordan didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. His father wasn't done yet. As Jordan settled back into his first-class seat, he still felt a little uneasy. The other passengers glanced at him, some looking surprised to see him return. He adjusted his backpack under the seat and looked out the window, trying to distract himself. Though he appreciated being back in first class, the memory of being removed earlier still stung. A flight attendant approached with a wide, nervous smile. This was a different person from the one who had removed him before. "Hi there, Jordan," she said warmly, crouching slightly to meet his eye level. "We're so sorry about earlier. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Jordan nodded politely. "Thank you," he said quietly, though he still didn't understand why they were suddenly being so nice to him. She placed a small tray of snacks and a drink on the table in front of him. "These are on the house," she added with a quick smile before walking away. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Mr. Andrews wasn't finished. After speaking to the airline's top executives, he made sure they understood the seriousness of what had happened. He demanded that the crew on the flight not only correct their mistake immediately, but also provide an explanation. He didn't raise his voice or lose his temper. Instead, his words were firm, and his calm demeanor only made his demands carry more weight. "You need to address this immediately," Mr. Andrews said to the airline's regional manager. "And once the flight lands, I'll be there to meet with your staff personally. This isn't just about my son. This is about ensuring no one else has to go through such an experience." Back on the plane, Jordan began to notice the staff treating him differently. The same passengers who had whispered and stared at him earlier now avoided making eye contact. He felt the change but wasn't sure why. As the flight continued, he started to relax a little, enjoying the large, comfortable seat and the special service. He decided to open his tablet and play a game, hoping it would distract him from the strange events of the day. As he played, a kind older woman sitting across the aisle leaned over with a warm smile. "You're handling this very well, young man," she said gently. "You've been very brave." Jordan blinked, surprised by her words. "Thank you," he said, unsure of how to respond. He didn't feel particularly brave, but her kind words made him feel a little better. As the plane began its descent, Jordan felt a mixture of emotions. He was relieved the flight was almost over but nervous about what might happen next. He thought about calling his dad again, but decided to wait until he landed. When the wheels touched the ground, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The flight attendant who had escorted him back to first class returned to his seat as the plane taxied to the gate. "Jordan," she said with a hesitant smile, "there will be someone waiting for you at the gate. Your father has been in contact with us, and we want to make sure everything is handled properly." Jordan's eyes widened. "My dad?" he asked. The attendant nodded. "Yes, he'll be meeting you once you disembark." When the plane finally reached the gate, Jordan stood up and grabbed his backpack. As he walked off the plane, he saw a group of people waiting, several airline staff members, including the regional manager, and to his relief, his father. Mr. Andrews stood tall, his expression calm but serious. Jordan rushed into his father's arms. "Dad," he exclaimed, feeling a wave of relief. Mr. Andrews hugged him tightly. "You did great, son," he said softly. "Now let me take care of the rest." Jordan held tightly onto his father's hand as they walked toward the group of airline staff waiting at the gate. Mr. Andrews stood tall and confident, his calm demeanor masking the determination burning inside him. Jordan looked up at his father, feeling a sense of safety and pride. He knew his dad wasn't just here for him, but to make things right. The regional manager stepped forward, a nervous smile on his face. "Mr. Andrews, we deeply apologize for the incident involving your son," he began, his tone apologetic. "This is not reflective of our company's values, and we are taking the matter very seriously." Mr. Andrews nodded slightly but didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned to Jordan and crouched down to his level. "Jordan, tell them what happened," he said softly, encouraging his son to share his experience. Jordan hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. But when he saw his dad's reassuring gaze, he took a deep breath and began. "I was sitting in my seat in first class, and the flight attendant told me I didn't belong there," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "I showed her my ticket, but she still made me move to economy. Everyone was looking at me, and I felt really embarrassed." The regional manager's expression turned grim as Jordan spoke. "We're truly sorry, Jordan," he said. "This should never have happened." Mr. Andrews stood up and looked directly at the airline staff. "My son was humiliated on your flight because someone assumed he didn't belong in first class," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't just about an apology, it's about accountability. I need to understand what steps you're taking to ensure this doesn't happen again." The staff exchanged uneasy glances before the regional manager spoke again. "We've already spoken with the crew involved, and they'll undergo additional training to handle such situations more appropriately," he explained. "We're also reviewing our policies to prevent assumptions based on appearance." Mr. Andrews nodded but didn't look completely satisfied. "Training is a good start," he said, "but what happened to my son is a reflection of a deeper issue. It's not enough to apologize. You need to rebuild trust with your passengers, especially young ones like Jordan." The regional manager looked thoughtful, nodding slowly. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Andrews. We'll work on a plan to improve interactions with all customers, and we'll personally ensure that Jordan feels welcome on any of our flights moving forward." As they spoke, the flight attendant who had removed Jordan earlier approached the group. Her face was flushed, and she seemed genuinely regretful. "Mr. Andrews," she began, "I want to personally apologize to you and your son. I made a mistake, and I should have handled the situation better. I'm truly sorry." Jordan looked at her for a moment. He wasn't sure how to feel: angry, forgiving, or just confused. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Jordan, it's up to you if you want to accept her apology," he said gently. Jordan thought for a moment before nodding. "I forgive you," he said quietly, "but I hope you'll be nicer to other kids in the future." The flight attendant's eyes glistened with tears. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll do better." As the conversation wrapped up, Mr. Andrews turned to the regional manager. "I appreciate your efforts, but I expect to see real changes," he said. "And I'll be following up." The manager nodded. "You have my word, Mr. Andrews. We'll make things right." Walking out of the airport, Jordan felt a mixture of emotions. He was still a little shaken by what had happened, but seeing his father handle the situation with strength and grace made him feel proud. "Dad," he said, looking up, "do you think things will really change?" Mr. Andrews smiled. "Change takes time," he replied. "But standing up for what's right is the first step. And today, you showed courage, Jordan. I'm proud of you." Jordan smiled back, feeling a little lighter. The journey wasn't over, but he knew they had made an important stand together. As they walked toward the car, Jordan kept glancing up at his father, still amazed by how calmly he had handled everything. "Dad," Jordan said softly, "how did you stay so calm? Weren't you angry?" Mr. Andrews smiled and placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "I was angry, son," he admitted. "But being calm is the best way to make people listen. When you stay calm, you stay in control, and that's how you can make real change." Jordan nodded, thinking about how everyone had taken his father so seriously. His dad didn't yell or raise his voice, but it was clear that people respected him. Jordan wanted to be like that one day. When they got home, Jordan saw his mom waiting at the door. She looked worried but relaxed when she saw them. "Is everything okay?" she asked, pulling Jordan into a hug. "We're fine now," Mr. Andrews assured her. "There was an issue on the flight, but we handled it." Jordan shared the story with his mom, explaining everything that had happened. As he spoke, he realized he felt less embarrassed and more proud. "Dad told them what they did was wrong," he said, "and they listened." His mom smiled and kissed his forehead. "You're brave, Jordan," she said. "Not everyone can handle something like that." Over the next few days, Jordan noticed that people around him started talking about what had happened. His dad had sent a formal complaint to the airline, and the story began to spread. Some of his friends' parents brought it up during conversations, praising how Mr. Andrews had handled the situation. One evening, Mr. Andrews sat down with Jordan in the living room. "I wanted to talk to you about something important," he said. "What happened on that flight wasn't just about you, Jordan. It's about making sure no one else feels like they don't belong." Jordan tilted his head, trying to understand. "But why didn't they believe me in the first place?" he asked. Mr. Andrews sighed. "Sometimes people make judgments based on what they see," he explained. "It's not fair, and it's not right. But when those moments happen, it's important to stand up and show them the truth." Later that week, the airline CEO reached out to Mr. Andrews. They scheduled a meeting to discuss what had happened and how the company could do better. Jordan was curious about the meeting, so his father explained it to him. "The CEO wants to hear directly from us," Mr. Andrews said. They're starting a new training program for their staff, and they want to include stories like yours to teach them how to treat all passengers with respect. Jordan felt a mix of emotions. He was glad something was being done, but still felt strange about being part of it. Will they really change? He asked. They can't change everything overnight, Mr. Andrews replied. But this is a good step, and it started because you spoke up. A few days later, Jordan received a package from the airline. Inside was a handwritten apology letter addressed to him. It read, "Dear Jordan, we deeply regret how you were treated on your recent flight. Your courage has helped us realize the importance of treating all our passengers with respect and kindness. Thank you for helping us learn and grow." Jordan also found a voucher for a free first-class flight in the future. He showed it to his dad, who smiled and said, "See, you made a difference." That evening, as Jordan lay in bed, he thought about everything that had happened. It had been a hard experience, but it taught him something important. He realized that even when things felt unfair, staying strong and standing up for yourself could lead to change. He decided that the next time he flew, he would walk into first class with his head held high. A week after the incident, Mr. Andrews invited Jordan to join him at the airline's headquarters for the meeting with the CEO and senior staff. Jordan was nervous but also curious about how everything would unfold. His father assured him that this meeting was about more than just an apology. It was about making things better for everyone. As they walked into the sleek office building, Jordan held his father's hand tightly. The receptionist greeted them warmly, and soon they were escorted to a large conference room. The CEO, a tall man with a kind face, stood to greet them as they entered. "Mr. Andrews, thank you for coming," he said, shaking hands with Jordan's dad. Then he turned to Jordan and smiled. "And you must be Jordan. It's an honor to meet you." Jordan nodded politely and took a seat beside his dad. The room was filled with other executives, all looking serious but respectful. Mr. Andrews started by recounting what had happened on the flight, his calm voice carrying authority. He made it clear that while the situation had been resolved for Jordan, it highlighted a much larger issue within the airline. "Jordan's experience isn't unique," Mr. Andrews said. "There are countless others who might not have had the means or support to speak up. This meeting isn't just about my son. It's about making sure every passenger is treated with dignity and respect." The CEO listened intently, nodding as Mr. Andrews spoke. "You're absolutely right," he said. "We've reviewed the incident, and we're committed to making real changes. That's why we've started developing a new training program for our staff, and we'd like your input." The room grew quiet as Mr. Andrews gestured toward Jordan. "Jordan, would you like to share how the experience made you feel?" he asked gently. Jordan hesitated for a moment, feeling all the eyes in the room on him. But then he remembered his dad's words about staying calm and speaking up. "At first, I was really excited about flying in first class," he began, his voice steady. "But when they told me I didn't belong there, I felt really embarrassed. It was like they didn't believe me, even though I had the ticket. I didn't understand why." The CEO leaned forward, his expression serious. "Jordan, I'm truly sorry you went through that," he said. "Hearing it from you makes it even clearer how important it is for us to change." During the meeting, the airline executives outlined their plans for improvement. They discussed introducing a new inclusivity training program for all employees, from flight attendants to management. They also planned to create a passenger feedback system to ensure similar incidents were reported and addressed immediately. Mr. Andrews suggested additional measures, such as teaching staff how to recognize and challenge their assumptions. "It's about empathy and understanding," he said. "Every passenger deserves to feel valued, no matter what." Jordan listened closely, feeling a mix of pride and relief. He hadn't expected to be part of something so important, but now he realized how his story could help others. After the meeting, the CEO personally thanked Jordan and his father. "Your courage and feedback have opened our eyes," he said. "We're grateful for your help in making our airline better." As they left the building, Jordan felt lighter. He looked up at his dad and asked, "Do you think this will really help people?" Mr. Andrews smiled and placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "It already has, son," he said. "You've shown them why it's important to treat everyone with respect. That's a big step." A few weeks after the meeting, Jordan and his father began to see the effects of their actions. The airline announced its new passenger inclusivity program in a public statement, outlining the changes they were making to ensure all customers were treated with fairness and respect. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting how one boy's experience led to a positive transformation. Jordan couldn't believe how much attention the story was getting. Friends and teachers at school told him how proud they were of him for standing up and sharing his experience. For the first time, he realized that what had happened to him wasn't just about his flight. It was about making things better for everyone. One afternoon, while Jordan was playing basketball in the driveway, a delivery truck pulled up to their house. The driver handed Mr. Andrews a large envelope with the airline's logo on it. Curious, Jordan came over to see what it was. His father opened the envelope and pulled out a letter and a certificate. The letter was addressed to Jordan and thanked him for his courage and honesty. It explained that the airline had officially implemented its new training program and that his story would be shared as part of the curriculum to teach staff about respect and inclusivity. The certificate was a token of appreciation, naming Jordan as an ambassador for change. Jordan looked up at his dad, his eyes wide with surprise. "Ambassador for change?" he asked. Mr. Andrews chuckled. "That means your story is helping to make a difference, son," he explained. "You've shown people how important it is to treat others with kindness and respect." The airline also invited Jordan and his family to a special event to celebrate the launch of the new program. At the event, Jordan met flight attendants, pilots, and even other passengers who shared similar stories. One flight attendant thanked him personally, saying, "Your story reminded us why our job is about more than just flying planes. It's about caring for people." Jordan felt a mix of pride and humility. He hadn't expected his experience to have such a big impact, but now he understood how powerful his voice could be. His father's words echoed in his mind. Standing up for what's right is the first step toward change. As the weeks went by, Jordan found himself thinking about the lessons he had learned. He realized that staying calm and confident, even in tough situations, could lead to better outcomes. He also understood the importance of standing up for himself and others, no matter how small he felt in the moment. One day, during dinner, Jordan turned to his dad. "Do you think I'll ever have to go through something like that again?" he asked. Mr. Andrews paused, then smiled gently. "I can't promise it won't happen, Jordan," he said honestly. "But now you know how to handle it. And you've made a difference, not just for yourself, but for others too. That's something no one can take away from you." The next time Jordan flew, he walked onto the plane with his head held high. His first-class ticket was in his hand, and he sat in his seat with confidence. The flight attendants greeted him warmly, and he noticed how genuine their smiles felt this time. Instead of feeling out of place, he felt like he belonged. As the plane took off, Jordan looked out the window and thought about how much he had grown. What started as a difficult experience had turned into a journey of strength, courage, and change. And while he knew there would always be challenges, he felt ready to face them. With a small smile, he leaned back in his seat, knowing that his story wasn't just about one flight. It was about something much bigger. And that was something worth being proud of.